The phone rang at 7:42 p.m. I was on the 45th floor of a steel glass tower in downtown Chicago auditing a bankruptcy file that smelled like desperation. My office was silent, my life was ordered. Then the screen lit up, Lakeview Academy. I answered expecting a wrong number, instead I got a frantic administrator. "Miss Sophia, your daughter has been waiting here for 3 hours. I stopped typing. I said calm and cold, "You have the wrong person, I am single." "I have no children," the woman sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. "Miss Sophia, she is sitting right here. She has your face and she is asking for you by name." The pen in my hand snapped. This wasn't a wrong number. This was a glitch in the ledger of my entire life. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from right now and tell me what is the one thing in your life you are absolutely certain is true. Because for me it was that I didn't have a child. I drove to the school, treating the situation like a financial discrepancy, an error to be corrected. Misplaced digit, but when I walked into the main office the error was sitting on a plastic chair, swinging her feet. Her name was Emma. She was 4 years old. She looked up at me and the air left the room. One blue eye, one green eye, heterochromia. I have the exact same genetic mutation. It's rare, it's undeniable. It was like looking into a mirror from 24 years ago. The administrator handed me a clipboard. "This is the enrollment form," she said, clearly annoyed. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was my signature, Sophia. The loop on the S, the sharp cut on the A, it was perfect, too perfect. I recognized that signature immediately because I had seen it on contracts for 5 years. It was the handiwork of my ex-fiancé, Richard. I didn't feel a maternal swell. I didn't feel a rush of love. I felt the cold shock of a forensic audit finding a missing $1 million. I looked at the little girl. She was an asset that had been manufactured without my consent and then abandoned. If I left her here, the state would liquidate her. Foster care, the system, she would be written off as a loss. I looked at the administrator. I signed the release form. I didn't say a word about the fraud. I didn't call the police. I took the asset into custody to secure the evidence. "Come on, Emma," I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. "Let's go." She took my hand. Her palm was warm. It was the only warm thing in my entire life. We walked out into the freezing Chicago wind, and for the first time in my career I was taking work home with me. Back at my condo, the silence was different. It usually hummed with the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant city traffic. Now it was punctuated by the small, rhythmic chewing of a 4-year-old eating a grilled cheese sandwich. I sat Emma at the glass dining table. She looked small against the backdrop of the Chicago skyline, a tiny organic variable in a sterile, inorganic equation. I didn't pace, I didn't call a friend to cry about the shock. I poured a glass of water, sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I needed to see the ledger. I needed to understand the transaction history of my own life. I went back 5 years. I remembered the pressure. Richard was a venture capitalist, a man who spoke in terms of legacy dynasties and quartiles. He wanted a family not for connection but for optics. He needed the portrait. I had refused. I was building my firm. I was becoming a partner. We had gone to one fertility consultation just to stop his nagging. I remembered signing a general intake form. I never went back. I thought I had simply let the option expire. I navigated to the clinic's portal. I typed in Richard's email. I guessed the password on the first try. Variations of his own name and his birth year. Arrogant men never think they need better security. The screen flashed green. I was in. I scrolled through the history and there it was. The unauthorized transaction. Date 5 years ago. Procedure, egg retrieval. Consent form signed by Sophia. Forged again. Then a wire transfer $216,000 to an agency in Ukraine. Surrogate fees, legal retainers, hush money. He hadn't just cheated, he had stolen genetic material. He had manufactured a human being like he was ordering a prototype for a new product line. I looked over the top of my screen at Emma. She had finished her sandwich and was wiping her hands on her jeans. In economics, the sunk cost fallacy teaches you to cut your losses. It tells you not to throw good money after bad, to walk away from a failed investment regardless of what you have already put into it. By that logic, I should call the authorities, hand Emma over to the state and scrub this violation from my life. I should treat the theft of my DNA as a loss to be written off. But as I watched her, I realized the flaw in that logic. The cost had already been paid. The violation had happened. My biology was sitting in my living room. To walk away now wouldn't be cutting a loss. It would be compounding the fraud. It would be allowing Richard to treat a human life like a depreciated asset he could just discard when it no longer balanced his books. I wasn't keeping her because I was overwhelmed by a sudden wave of maternal instinct. I was keeping her because I was the only person in the world who wouldn't treat her like a line item. I closed the laptop. The audit was finished. Now the liquidation of Richard's assets would begin. I wasn't a victim of theft anymore. I was the management. I tracked Richard down in less than an hour. He wasn't hiding in a cave. He was in a $10 million penthouse on the Gold Coast, preparing for the biggest day of his career. His tech company was launching its initial public offering in 3 days. He was about to become a billionaire on paper. I didn't call his main line. I called the burner number I found buried in the clinic correspondence. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight. "Who is this?" I didn't introduce myself, I just said, "I have her." Silence, then a laugh, short and sharp like breaking glass. "Sophia, I should have known you'd be the one to find the error. You always were meticulous." I drove to the penthouse. The doorman let me up without a question. Richard had cleared me. When the elevator doors opened, he was standing by the window swirling a glass of whiskey. He looked older, harder. The charm that had once fooled me was gone, replaced by a sleek corporate cruelty. He didn't apologize, he didn't look shamed, he looked annoyed, like I was a vendor delivering the wrong catering order. "Why, Richard?" I asked. "Why steal my DNA? Why make a child just to abandon her?" He turned his face bored. "You know how the board is, Sophia. They wanted stability. They wanted a family man. A CEO with a legacy is a CEO they can trust with their capital. I needed the optics. And frankly, your genetics were the best available option. Intelligent, healthy, low risk." It was a business decision. A business decision. He spoke about our daughter like she was a diversified portfolio. "So why dump her now?" I asked, my voice dangerously steady. "Because the narrative changed," he said, sipping his drink. "I'm marrying Vanessa, Senator Thorne's daughter. Her family is old money, Sophia. They don't like complications. They don't like surprised children from previous arrangements. Vanessa made it clear. Clean the slate or no wedding. And no wedding means no political backing for the IPO." He set the glass down. "Emma was a depreciating asset. She served her purpose. Now she's just baggage." He walked closer, invading my space. "And don't think about going to the press. You were always cold, Sophia, always career-focused. Who's going to believe you didn't know I have the records? I have the unstable mother narrative ready to go. You're better suited to be a nanny anyway. Keep her quiet, keep her hidden, and I won't destroy your reputation." I looked at him. I looked at this man who thought he could edit human beings out of his life like typos in a prospectus. He didn't see a person in front of him. He saw an object. He lacked object constancy, the psychological ability to maintain an emotional bond with someone when they are not physically present or serving your immediate needs. To Richard, people only existed as long as they were useful. When Emma stopped being a prop for his investors and started being a liability for his marriage, she simply ceased to matter. He thought he was threatening me, he thought he was winning, but he didn't see the shift in my eyes. He didn't see the confusion evaporate, replaced by a clarity so cold it burned. "I was never dangerous, Richard," I said softly, "until now." I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door, I didn't scream. Architects don't scream at a building that's about to collapse. They just check the blueprints one last time before they detonate the charges. I hired Christina the next morning. She was 62, wore pearls, and had a reputation for turning divorce settlements into full-scale demolitions. When I laid out the case in her mahogany-paneled office, she didn't gasp. She smiled, a shark recognizing blood in the water. "This is fraud," she said, tapping a manicured nail on the DNA test. "But it's messy fraud. We need to make it undeniable. We need to trace every single dollar." So I began the audit of a lifetime. I didn't sleep. I lived on caffeine and the glow of my monitors. I pulled Richard's old bank records, the ones I still had access to from when we were merging finances for a wedding that never happened. I cross-referenced them with the shell companies he used for his venture capital deals. Money leaves a trail. It always does. You just have to know how to read the footprints. I found the first transfer, $216,000 to a consulting firm in Cyprus. I traced the firm. It was a front for the surrogacy agency, but Richard had categorized it in his business ledger as R&D, consultation, research and development. He had written off the manufacturing of his own child as a business expense to lower his taxable income. I kept digging. I found the payoffs. $5,000 a month to a private nanny service that was actually just a hush fund for a woman who kept Emma hidden in a rental property for 3 years. I found the forgery fees payments to a graphic designer known for document replication. Every click of the mouse was a new indictment. Every spreadsheet row was another bar in the cell I was building for him. Forensic accounting isn't just about math, it's about storytelling. It's about taking disparate data points, a wire transfer here, a credit card charge there, and weaving them into a narrative of intent. Richard's intent was clear. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had executed a multi-year, multi-million-dollar operation to defraud the government, his investors, and me. I printed it all out. The paper trail was 4 in thick. I bound it in a simple black binder. I stopped looking for an apology. I stopped looking for closure. I started looking for a felony. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting for custody, I was fighting for a correction. The universe had an imbalance, a debt that hadn't been paid, and I was the collection agency. Just when I thought the case was airtight, I found the anomaly. It was buried in the bylaws of his tech company, a document I had archived years ago when helping him structure his initial incorporation. I was cross-referencing his personal assets with his corporate holdings, looking for any other hidden accounts when I noticed a clause in the shareholder agreement. Class A voting shares. These were the super voting shares, the ones that gave him absolute control over the board. To vest these shares, the CEO had to meet certain stability criteria. One of them was explicit. The CEO must be the primary beneficiary of a spousal trust or family trust, demonstrating long-term estate planning and personal stability. It was a clause designed by his early investors to prevent a reckless bachelor CEO from burning down the company. They wanted a family man. They wanted someone with something to lose. I pulled up the trust documents filed with the state. There it was, the Richard and Sophia Family Trust, dated 4 years ago. My signature was on it, forged again. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the beneficiary listing. Primary beneficiary Sophia, contingent beneficiary Emma. He hadn't just stolen my eggs to play house. He hadn't just manufactured a child to look like a dad. He had used our non-existent family to unlock millions of dollars in voting power. He had defrauded his entire board of directors. He had built his empire on the legal fiction that we were a happy, stable unit, quietly supporting him from the background. This wasn't just family court anymore. This was securities fraud. This was corporate malfeasance. He had lied to shareholders about the very structure of his ownership. I sat back in my chair. The room was dark, lit only by the street lights of Chicago reflecting off the lake. He didn't want a child, he didn't even want a legacy, he wanted a voting proxy. Emma wasn't a person to him, she was a key card, she was the code he punched in to get access to the boardroom. The realization didn't make me angry, it made me lethal. He had reduced my daughter to a line of code in a corporate charter. He had reduced me to a signature on a fraudulent trust. I picked up the phone and called Christina. It was 3 a.m. She answered. On the first ring, I found it, I said, I found the kill switch. Tell me, she said, her voice wide awake. He didn't just defraud me, I said, he defrauded the SEC. He's not going to lose custody, Christina, he's going to lose the company. I hung up and looked at the pile of documents. The paper trail wasn't just a cage anymore, it was a guillotine, and I was about to drop the blade. The night of the IPO launch party was a spectacle of excess. It was held at the Field Museum under the skeletal gaze of Soother. T-Rex, waiters circulated with champagne that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Richard was at the center of it all, beaming his fiancée Vanessa on his arm, looking every inch the political royalty she was. I walked in. I wasn't wearing a gown. I was wearing my best trial suit, charcoal grey, sharp enough to cut glass. Security moved to intercept me, but I flashed a smile and whispered something about a forgotten document for the CEO. Confidence is the best key card. I found Richard near the bar laughing at a joke made by a board member. When he saw me, his smile faltered, then hardened. He excused himself and marched over, grabbing my elbow. What do you think you're doing? He hissed. I told you I'd ruin you. I'm here to balance the books, Richard, I said calmly. Security, he signaled to a guard. Wait, I said, before you do that you might want to look at these. I placed 2 folders on the high-top cocktail table between us. Folder A was red, folder B was blue. In the red folder, I said, is a whistleblower report addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission, your board of directors, and Senator Thorne. It details the fake spousal trust, the forged signatures, the wire fraud disguised as R&D, and the securities fraud used to vest your Class A shares. If I file this, the IPO is halted immediately. You go to federal prison, your assets are frozen, you lose everything. Richard stared at the folder. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. In the blue folder, I continued is a voluntary termination of parental rights and a binding settlement agreement. It transfers a $5 million irrevocable education trust to Emma and grants me sole permanent custody. You sign this, I shred the red folder. You walk away with your company, your wedding, and your lie intact, but you never see her again, you never speak my name again. He looked at me. He looked at Vanessa, who was waving at him from across the room. He looked at the red folder. You're bluffing, he whispered. Try me, I said. You treated people like numbers, Richard, so I ran the numbers. You're insolvent. He opened the red folder. He saw the first page, a copy of the forged trust document with my forensic annotations. He slammed it shut. His hand was shaking. He looked at his future, shining and fragile, and he looked at the past he had tried to bury. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the pen from his pocket and pulled the blue folder toward him. He signed the termination papers on a cocktail table, next to a half-empty glass of champagne. He signed away his daughter to save his stock price. He shoved the papers at me. "Get out," he rasped. "Get out and never come back." "Pleasure doing business," I said. I took the signed documents. I picked up the red folder. I walked out of the museum past the dinosaur bones into the cool night air. I walked to the nearest trash can and dropped the red folder inside. I didn't need to destroy him. His own choices would do that eventually. I had what I wanted. I had the only asset that couldn't be liquidated. My life was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. The condo that had been a monument to sterility was now filled with the chaos of a 4-year-old. There were Lego towers in the living room and finger paintings on the fridge. I sat at my desk looking at the screen. The spreadsheet named Richard was open. It was the master file, the ledger of every lie, every theft, every manipulation. I moved the cursor to the file menu. I clicked delete. "Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file?" the screen asked. Yes, the file vanished. I walked into the bathroom where Emma was brushing her teeth. She was standing on a stool looking into the mirror. She saw me and grinned, toothpaste foam on her chin, one blue eye, one green eye. I looked in the mirror next to her. My own mismatched eyes stared back. For years I had thought my heterochromia was a flaw, a genetic error. Now looking at her, I realized it was a signature. It was the watermark that proved she was mine. I wasn't a mother because I had carried her for 9 months. I was a mother because I had shown up when it mattered. I had balanced the books. I had cleared the debt. I didn't choose how I became a mother, but I chose to stay one. If you've ever had to clean up a mess you didn't make, share this story and tell me in the comments what's the biggest lie you've ever uncovered. If you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe for more story. Share this story. You are not alone. God bless you. Thanks for watching.